Hi, chronically speaking, and this week I have a friend and a colleague that I had the privilege to be a guest on her podcast, Natasha Punia, or Dr. Natasha Punia.
Thank you.
Uh, and can you tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, I could do an introduction, and please stop me if I'm waffling. But as Roy said, I'm Dr. Natasha Punia. I'm founder of InflamMed, and I am a passionate advocate for individuals navigating life with chronic inflammation, chronic illness, and invisible disabilities. And I have a background in cancer immunology, and an MBA from Imperial College. And I guess I can talk a bit about my career. Like I've kind of crossed academia and tech startups and entrepreneurship, and always with a deep desire to empower others. Um, and I have had personal battles myself with chronic illness. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I was diagnosed quite young, and ADHD. Although I didn't always know that I have ADHD. I think we're all finding these things out, and these experiences have truly shaped my resolve and inspired the creation really of InflamMed.
This is great. Thank you so much. We're going to hear a lot about InflaMed in a second, but before that, like you had a very interesting career from science and research to
Yeah.
startups, entrepreneurship, business. Um, how did you eventually end up in the thing that maybe is less lucrative in terms of making money, which is patient empowerment?
Yes.
Like I know you have a chronic illness yourself, but eventually most people like us are not ending up being patient advocates.
No. I mean, maybe I should start by explaining a bit about InflaMed.
Of course.
So InflaMed is dedicated to transforming how we view and manage chronic conditions through community support, curated insights, and storytelling. And really, what that is kind of an amalgamation of my experience. And our mission is to ensure that no one with these conditions feels alone. Again, speaking very much to my personal experience, it was very lonely. Um, and to help people thrive in both their personal and professional lives, because when you have a chronic condition, separating personal from professional life is just difficult.
Yeah.
I found it impossible.
Yeah. For me
um
too.
exactly. it,
Yeah.
it's and it's to do with sort of how we traditionally view things, and so we always try and fit in, and nothing is designed for people like us with chronic conditions. And so that's a broad explanation of InflaMed. Um, but really, what it boils down to is these two broad societal challenges. Um, one being the healthcare system. So I live in the UK, and we have the NHS,
Yeah.
and the healthcare system in the UK is just lacking. It's just really lacking, and it's not changing anytime soon. And Roy, you and I spoke about this around
Yeah. Yeah.
the need for holistic healthcare, and it's just really not anywhere. It's so hard to find that kind of um, support. And I write a lot about what I've went through the years with my experience with this chronic condition. And through this platform, I'm trying to encourage others to share also their insights during Q&As and podcasts, and trying to address this significant gap. Um, and and I'm sure like you can relate this. It's been a lot of like self-learning, and um, I feel like I was a little bit ahead because I have a science background, and so I can understand the terminology, and I know how to research, and I could use what I've done professionally to help me personally, and but not everybody has that kind of background. And um like personally speaking, they put me on chemotherapy for 2 years, and I wasn't offered any pain management.
Yeah.
And rheumatoid arthritis is it's my immune system attacking my joints, and it was causing me a lot of pain. Yet nobody in the healthcare system was really tackling that side of things. It was very much left to me, and
Yeah.
that made it even more lonely. Um, And so InflamMed is trying to kind of, encourage people to share these insights with one another, because there are real challenges happening right now. And then the other side of this is the workplace challenges. So, we spend majority of our time in our workplace, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and we all place so much value on it. But what happens when none of it's designed for people with chronic conditions? It's a constant battle. And I've never actually spoken about this before, and I do plan to write about this more extensively, because I think it's important. But at the end of last year, I suddenly faced redundancy, and this experience, combined with my condition flared up, my ADHD went out of control, my anxiety it was overwhelming, and it kind of forced me to reflect. And I realized that since I was diagnosed, I have often been undervalued and perceived as maybe less committed than others. And, because I've had to enforce these health boundaries. So I was just doing what I needed to survive, to kind of manage day to day. But I think what that did was, without any support or the right policies in place, I think what they did is leave me extremely lonely and extremely vulnerable in that system. Probably judged as, let's face it, as lazy compared to others, because I wasn't doing the overtime, or I wasn't showing up early or in every meeting, at every social. And so these two challenges, I think, just kind of came to a head at the end of last year for me. And I realized that I've been kind of given a gift of time, and I wanted to take all that I've learned, my personal insights, my skills, and put it to something that I'm really passionate about. And hopefully you can hear from when I'm talking that this is something I am really, really passionate about. And so InflamMed was born.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and honest. I think that is lacking. We are both very active on LinkedIn, and
We are.
LinkedIn is like a fun fest. Everybody is so successful, and everybody, if in Instagram everybody is abroad eating amazing brunches and so on, like living the good life. So in LinkedIn, everybody is in conference. Everybody has such a good time in their workplace, and we know statistically that this is absolutely wrong. Like, this is not the reality. And we have a lot of burnout. People are actually suffering in workplaces, like, more than often. And I feel similar to you in the sense of workplaces. To be honest with you, even if I wanted to be full-time employed and not self-employed like I am today, I could not make it happen, because I haven't found yet a workplace that can support an illness like ours. These relapse-based illnesses that are very unpredictable. So your peers will look at you like you're a bit lazy or trying to find excuses, and your bosses will not understand you. And the law is not supportive of, like, it's either a sick leave, right? Or like a long-term, like, there is no kind of a day off when you're having a relapse, which is a shame. And also, it has a lot to do also with paternalism in the system. We have some countries who are trying to make changes regarding to women's period. And I think this is a good start. But something that I felt very, very strongly was that the academia is quite similar. And students with chronic illnesses really suffer. We have some systems in place to protect them, but I have to say that in both of my degrees, the experience was not optimal, not in the eyes of the peers and not in the eyes of the professors or the institution. And I think that we have to do something about it, us as patient advocates.
I agree. And I would say, I would go a step further in academia and say there's less support generally. And so people slipping through the cracks are more. And I think as a student, as an early researcher, and because academia has this sort of it's a slightly different culture. The pull towards academia is that you're doing societal good. And so
Yeah.
the expectations of you are so much more. And so to get your voice heard, or to say, oh, I think I need support, it's a much harder battle. In fact, like, academia is quite a good one to sort of look at and say, okay, what shouldn't we be doing? Like, what lessons can we learn
Yeah.
from academia? Because if you look at the statistics of PhD students, it's terrible. The amount of mental illness that is
Yeah.
happening specifically around students is terrible. And and these stories are struggling to get through because it is such a bubble. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you realize there's a massive epidemic happening there, and these are now spilling over into the workplace. And I could talk about this issue for a very long time. I don't know about you, but because of my career, I have experienced different types of workplaces. And I've realized that, again, another thing that we're judged about is pick a career, and it should be quite linear. But
Yeah.
again, when you have a chronic condition, your priorities are slightly different. In fact, it's a strength to be able to kind of find a workplace that suits your needs better, which is going to be a lot of kind of trying and testing. And I'm also yet to find a workplace that understands or tries to understand individuals that have chronic conditions. And it's all well, like the government putting in these policies, or the whole trying to be more inclusive. And yes, businesses can put in policies, but if you don't try and address the stigma
Yeah.
and the culture, it's almost redundant. Because, so a good example is like the tech industry.
Yeah.
One of the benefits that they have is unlimited leave. Like, doesn't that sound great? So if you
It
and
sounds
I were like,
amazing.
oh, they've got
Yeah.
unlimited leave, that's they're sort of are they speaking to someone like me? Is that because they understand, and that means if I need to take time off, I could take time off? Great. No, that's not what happens. What happens is people still, they feel pressure not to take that
Yeah.
time off because they're
Yeah.
judged. Somebody in the back is looking at how many days this person is taking off, or I'm judging the person next to me for taking months at a time off. And when it comes to performance reviews, or if you're going to compare me with somebody else, are you going to go with somebody who takes less time off? Yes, because that's how we measure productivity in the workplace. I think it's completely backwards, and that's what we're dealing with, and it's complicated, and it's a lot of work. So all these policies and these initiatives that have happened, none of them have really been, I think, dealing with that issue very well.
It's super interesting because I think that once you're tagged as a problem maker, kind of,
You're right.
there is no
Yeah.
way back. Like,
No.
I remember it from even early in my military service when I started to have the symptoms.
Mm.
I was immediately ostrated by the platoon members because army service is not only deployment for battle. You have a lot of routine tasks and chores that you have to do. So if you cannot help in the kitchen or clean or guard. So this is how I started my journey, and then I realized that no matter where I go, I'm never the same. Which for me, it makes me really sad because once you've initiated this journey towards healing or towards self-management, and you're already a bit better, and you're ready to go back to working place or starting school, and then you experience that the world doesn't accept you as you are. I think that this is even harder than the initial relapse, and I've heard stories from fellow patients that it just was kind of the final confirmation that it's better to stay in bed, kind of, and this really makes me sad.
Yeah, it's a lot of limitations that it's almost, well, don't try because you're not gonna be greeted. You're not gonna be yeah, you're gonna it's better to sort of either mask and don't say it because you might be judged, or just don't do. And I think
Yeah.
that's it's not a great way to live. And it does a lot to your mindset. And it takes a very long time to undo when you're told just fit in or don't, or just don't do that. I think you internalize a lot of that, and it can take a very long time to actually say, you know what, no, I'm not the
Yeah.
problem. I'm not the problem. Society is the problem. And yeah, it's a difficult journey.
It's really making me think because, like at least with the social security systems that I've been working or engaging with, um, it's very black and white, right? It's either you
Yeah.
get some disability benefits or, oh, you're back to work now. And
Yes.
with dynamic disabilities like ours, I don't understand why those authorities that actually would benefit from people going back to work, why
Mm-hmm.
not adjusting and providing like the benefits for disability constantly or triggered by relapses, because then you can
Yeah.
work, and if you have a relapse, you can go back, and the work assignments or the placements that you get can be fitted
Yeah. Yeah.
towards people that might have to take more leave days. But it's not, and it's funny because at least in Israel we have a very developed rehabilitation system. So when you are rehabilitated back to the working market, they have to say, okay, you cannot do what you did before. So for me,
Mm.
I was too young, but they looked at my army service and what I did a bit before, and they say, okay, so you're like a first aid instructor. This is your profession. Like this is what they could fit on me because
Right.
of what I did in, training officer and so on. So you cannot do it anymore. That's
Mm.
it. So you're deemed to never do it, but we
Exactly.
can fund like retraining for you. And the retraining schemes that they do, it's not like they give you something that it's actually beneficial for you also financially and for a system. So for instance, programming, which you can do more remotely if needed,
Mm-hmm.
they actually are in tune with the market needs, and the market needs, nursing workers, teachers, social workers. So funnily enough, they actually deemed me to become a teacher. So I cannot be an instructor, but I can be a teacher,
Right.
even though medically there is no chance I can stand in front of a class and be under these pressures. And I'm only one example of thousands of people who are going through it. And the only way they can continue receiving any kind of social support and benefits is by agreeing to the scheme. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
retrain in something that is eventually going to lead you back in beds, which is kind of
It's just
funny to me.
it's not sustainable, is it?
No,
It's not
not at
sustainable.
all.
And I think like you and I right now, if that was presented to us, we'd say absolutely not. Because we know ourselves much better than you do. That there's not even something I'm willing to go down, because I know that you haven't designed it in that way. And so no. And but when you're younger, you don't
Yeah,
know these things, and you make these mistakes. And it's unfortunate. And I think you and I both are working to try and prevent that from happening, because it's interesting the way that you're talking about it is it's starting to come into more and more conversations around, because we've had flexible working being pushed, and probably as a result of COVID, let's be
yeah,
honest, right? So suddenly you've got masses amount of people who were healthy and then suddenly not healthy, and continue to need the same support that people like you and I have always needed.
yeah,
Um, and so now these conversations are being had, specifically in the UK. A lot. There's been a few articles around long COVID, um, and the chronic fatigue and the symptoms that come with that. And how do you then change your workplace to then accommodate conditions like these? And so even though these conditions have always been there, and many of your workforce will probably have had these conditions, suddenly it's kind of come to the forefront, and it will be really interesting to see how they go about accommodating, if they do, right? Because at the end of the day, they're businesses. And so their incentives are not really to keep or attract individuals like you and I, even though we bring a lot to the table, and I could talk about this forever, but that it's just not something that they've done before. Like flexible working helps the workforce as a whole, but is not specifically targeted for people with chronic conditions. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see how that kind of conversation evolves over the next years.
Same here. The problem with this conversation, it's again usually very shallow and trend based. And I wrote quite a lot in the past few years. Is that like the chronic epidemic is coming, or it's already here? It was even before COVID that I thought. Even before COVID, I just look at the numbers and I see, wow, like we have so many new people diagnosed with chronic illness. And when these illnesses are totally manageable, let's say a very light form of type 2 diabetes, and you have everything under control, so you can do fairly amount of regular working. But what happened with all of the new wave of fatigue-based, what I called illnesses, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, POTS syndrome, long COVID, which is very, very similar eventually in the manifestation. We have millions of new people. It's not even in 1,000 or 100,000 globally. We're talking about millions of disabled people joining the work circles, and we are not prepared. In Austria, you have this old scheme that you kind of give tax benefits if you employ disabled people, but then it's very funny because it's good, but on the other hand, it creates this pooling of, okay, I will have this trophy disabled people in my workplace, so I can get this win-win situation. But it's going to sound awful, but it's easier to choose somebody who is completely capable of doing 8 hours working place and, for example, missing a leg because of an accident.
But that's a good example of you can put in these policies, but at the end of the day, if and it's this thing of if you and I were to go to an interview and there's two different scenarios. One where I said they encouraged us to disclose, right? Because that's what's happening. They want to be able to get onto these schemes and have that to show. Am I still going to disclose knowing that they don't have the right policies in place? Probably not. And so we also have a different scenario where there's a lot of people in the workforce who haven't disclosed, and they just don't know about it because yes, like the policies and they may be lacking in that, who knows, but also the stigma, because they cannot control how my colleagues are going to treat me, or they cannot control that. And so I think we've also got a scenario as well where many people in the workforce are now either disclosing because they have to, or they've got some sort of fatigue and they just don't have a choice. So I think that's a really interesting scenario that's also increasing alongside generally the population is getting sicker. So I absolutely agree that there's almost been this tipping point since COVID where there's just a significant population that have something that now affects the workforce, now affects the business. And so it would be really interesting because based on previous, it's not really worked. Those policies haven't really done much. They're almost, and yes, it doesn't sound great, but they are a tick box exercise, and not really inclusive, not really backed up by anything. And so they've sort of almost failed. But now it's a slightly different scenario. And so, it's a interesting space at the moment.
Yeah, and it's also, I'm commending the new movement of diversity, inclusion, diversity in the workplace, inclusion in the workplace, empowerment, like all these washed up words that are nice, but it has to be more than a picture in LinkedIn of everybody around the table and one of them has a very visible disability. I think that even those DEI officers sometimes don't fully understand invisible disabilities.
No.
I had the pleasure of giving a keynote in the Austrian Disability Day here in front of a lot of decision makers, and it was like preaching to the choir. Amazing people wants to make change, but once you step out and you meet other CEOs of companies,
Mm-hmm.
It's not coming out of evilness or anything. Like, people do not understand what it means to have invisible disability, and it's, my story in my college was really tough one for me because I had to appeal to the disability protection officer. There is somebody, usually an admin person, that has this title. It's like the sexual harassment officer, and they, like, I think they're sitting in their room and praying nobody to bug them with this because they really don't know how to handle it. And my college didn't know how to deal with the fact that my disability is not a classic visible one. And
Mm-hmm.
I struggled throughout my master just because I could not demonstrate um, being normal disabled. What is, like, this world normal when it comes to
Yeah.
disability?
Yeah.
And it's really sad on me. I'm getting at least once or twice a month a random email from somebody who read my book
Mm-hmm.
or listened to my podcast or so on, that says, I feel so lonely in my workplace
Yeah.
or in my study place.
Yeah.
I haven't disclosed. I'm afraid to do so.
Yeah.
And it's so important to talk about it, but it's also so important to start doing things for it. And there's so many projects, immigrants at work,
Yeah.
pride at work, and like,
Yeah.
this is booming and it's great, but
But people
chronic
like you and
illness,
I still feel
yeah,
very lonely. It's still very
yeah,
lonely. I
because chronic
mean,
illness is not
yeah.
sexy. It's
No,
like,
no, no. Yeah.
I think this is something that we must change. And I think it leads me also to ask you about your approach.
Mm-hmm.
And to start with, I want to ask you, why did you choose the name for your project? Because it has something inside that it intrigues me. Like, InflamMed
Yeah.
is like, for
I
me,
mean, yeah. What go,
it's
so
like,
what does it trigger for you?
for me, trigger more like inflammation and the actual underlying cause of some chronic illnesses. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting because eventually you empower patients wherever they are, right? It's completely above disease area. But
Mm.
you chose a name that has some meaning, so I really want to learn about it.
Yeah, it's actually quite layered, I would say, because it's as I started with it for a reason, and as I've gone on, it's almost kind of become a different meaning altogether. All very important. So the reason I chose it was because I guess my condition, it was quite personal. So my condition, when it is flaring up, I feel like my body is on fire.
Yeah,
And really what I'm speaking to is that inflammation, because that's the bit where there's no language to it. And so that's the bit that you don't see.
yeah,
So my condition can present and okay, you see that, or you can do blood tests and you can say, oh, you have this diagnosis. But what I struggle to communicate with people, with society, with healthcare system is how my body is feeling underneath and the pain
yeah,
that the inflammation is causing. And it's so personal to you, but it's also the thing that is happening, and I don't understand why it's this is the actual thing that we were all trying
mm,
to manage. There's no language to it. We don't talk really about chronic inflammation. We don't really understand it very well, and it can manifest in a lot of ways. And then secondly, it's also the thing that connects us all, people um who are suffering in silence. It's the thing that's happening that is compounding over time. Some people it happens earlier because of many different things,
yeah,
like childhood trauma or genetics. And so it presents early and it happens, it can come out in many different ways. But every single person is touched by inflammation, and every single person right now will at some point be touched by chronic inflammation. So it's the thing that kind of connects us all. And then also just like phonetically, so there's inflammation and then there's the medicine. And so when you combine it, it's the InflamMed. And that's also just kind of bringing science to empathy. because I think this piece around storytelling is missing. There's just a gap. There's just a gap in society where you can tell these stories in a really authentic way. And let's the more I'm digging, the more that there is data. There is data to show that this is an epidemic. There is science and research. Just nobody's quite connected them all together, and we're just not speaking about it in this way in the workplace, with my friends, with my family. It's not a thing that people really understand and really talk about until it becomes something, until it's too late sometimes. And so what I want is for people to start talking about it now. How do you manage that inflammation now before it becomes a problem? What is it that affects inflammation? It's everything. It's your environment, it's politics, it's what you're eating, it's many, many different factors, and everybody needs to be empowered to kind of say, okay, this is a thing that I need to monitor, much like we monitor other things. Why aren't we talking about this in our language? Because we should, and it will connect us all, and it will make us much more empathetic. And another thing that I think connects us all is, yes, this inflammation that's happening and the ways that we are trying to manage it, but also the fact that it is hidden, it's invisible, you don't see it. And you can become very good at masking it. You can become very good at hiding it. And that journey and that process of saying, I have this thing, it's incredibly lonely because of that. It takes an incredible long time to say. And like you kind of said, that people want proof. Like people, when people can't see it, people just assume things. And it's a commonality that we actually all share. Whether it's now or at some point in the future. And because of COVID and things like that, there's been this tipping point. But we haven't typically been speaking about inflammation, and we should have been. It would have made, things a lot less lonely because, there's just language to it. So yeah, it's quite layered, but those I would say are the main reasons for calling it InflamMed.
Thank you. I think that you really explained through the name your actual cause, which is very noble, because as far as I know, with my scientific knowledge, is that we have tools, we have biomarkers to kind of monitor inflammation, but they are only used in acute illnesses, as far as I know, clinically.
Right.
You don't do a CRP test or other inflammation marker tests on a regular basis. You do it when you have some sort of a infection suspicion there, or something that the doctors think, oh, there is something going on.
Yes.
And for me, it's just another reflection of how we're lacking prevention in healthcare. So what you're doing is basically trying to promote health through kind of encouraging people to share, learn more, and actually develop behaviors that can prevent inflammation from developing, right? And what is your strategy to do it? Because I cannot say it a mistake, but my initial thought after I got a bit better was that technology is the way to go. Like I said, I have to start startups, and I failed them all, other than one that I can say it's a social exit success. I failed them all because I think that, firstly, as we mentioned before, I was not cut out physically to be a startup CEO. Like, it was just too much for my body, and I realized. Second of all, I didn't use my accumulation of talents and experiences. I tried to be kind of this imposter who is like, startups are the way to change the world. And because you worked so much with startups in your path, I want to understand like how you do it differently. How do you channel your PhD studies, your business knowledge into this project that eventually aims to change people's behaviors, which we both know it's very hard.
Yeah, I mean that's a very interesting question actually, because that speaks to mindset, and that speaks to process, and it speaks to vulnerability. I would say, because so I mean I think I said that when I was made redundant, I realized that I was trying to fit into a lot of things. And there's a beauty in being still and
Yeah.
sitting with yourself and getting bored almost, and
Hmm.
kind of going back to, okay, let's assess what's happening and let's look at my skills, let's look at my experience, and how do you almost mesh them together? How do you mesh them together? And then at some point it's being vulnerable and just get going. And I would say, yeah, like, yes, I understand, like, sorry, I understand the tech that's out there. And recently I made a move into social impact. And so the mindset shift is, don't start with the tech, don't start with the technology, don't start with the tools, start with the problem that you're trying to solve. Because at the end of the day, we are human beings, and human beings are the one that are going to be using the tech. And the only reason they're going to be using the tech is because it's solving a problem that they need right now. And so you always start there. And so what I was starting with was, what is the gap out there? What is it that I wish I had growing up and having these conditions? What is missing? And start building that. It can be very minimal. So unless you know that what you're building, people are interested in it, there's no point bringing in the tech, because then it gets expensive, it gets complicated, and it tends to lose that thread. So it's get that thread really clear and crisp, and make sure that whatever you're doing is bringing value. Because once you have that, then you can scale or bring in other things. It's a hard thing to do, right? And I wouldn't say it's the easiest path, but it's the one that's probably likely to be more successful. And also what that does is it makes you attuned to the problem. It, you can navigate the problem a bit better. You listen to people. I really listen to people. Actually, I didn't do this thinking I'm going to build InflamMed. Um, people, I've learned to listen to friends, because the friends that really know me, people I've been vulnerable with, but people who really see my strengths. I don't think I've ever really been listening to them before, because I've been too busy, especially in a place like London. And also, so I was always that kid that had lots of potential, but I had no space to explore that potential, because people kept saying to me, you do this, you've got to pick a career, you've got to do this, not realizing that because of who I am, I don't fit into any of that. And it was always going to be a difficult struggle. And because of who I am, I'm very vulnerable to listening to what people think that I should do. And so it really was just starting from scratch of, I'm going to stop listening to people that don't know me, listen to people who do know me, and just start there. And there's something in about, and you also, you create content. And I think that has the same process. What problem am I trying to solve? And how do I want to tell it? And do people resonate with it? So I started there, and I have started there, and I will always start there, because I think storytelling is a very powerful way of getting a message across and getting the value across. What you then do with that, whether it's technology or community, I've kind of lent more towards community, because again, that's the problem I was solving, is the fact that
Yeah.
there was not a community. And so how you build, and many people have done this, right? And actually what I'm finding is people in this community are so lovely
Yeah.
and so kind, and so much, like, so willing to give you advice. And so it's connecting with the right people. I've been lucky, again, with my friends. I've been lucky that I got this scholarship to do this MBA. They all graduated yesterday, so I want to give a
Congratulations.
shout out to them, because I met the most incredible people who saw my value, and I don't know if it was just them, or the fact that I got lucky with them, or the fact that we were brought together just to kind of create value. When that's the whole point of MBA, is like we're just working hard and we want to learn. And it was just the right environment for me to kind of go, you know what, I can do this, and here are people who are seeing my value. Let's start from there. And so I mean, there are loads of like tips that I can give you around like frameworks and structure, and that's another thing that really helps, especially because I have like ADHD, and it can become very overwhelming quite quickly. And probably not even if you don't have ADHD, it's an overwhelming process to do, especially if you're very curious about things and you haven't quite found your purpose or your meaning yet, which is very important and very important to health. And so letting yourself get bored, kind of removing yourself a little bit from, the noise, is the best place to start.
It's deeply resonates with me because I think I did it backwards. I spent so many years in bed, and I thought that society expects me to do something, and I have to do something with those
Right.
years in bed. It mustn't go to waste. So I said, I must do projects that will help other people. But I was never trained to, to look at the problem,
Yes,
but
yes.
actually
Yeah.
to look at the solution. And I think that the problem with only looking at solution is also you're going immediately into a realm that is highly competitive, and it's monetarily appreciated. It's not measured by impact.
Yep.
And when I start creating content, and this is why I started Chronically, it's about storytelling. It's about chronic storytelling of chronically ill people. Then it all made sense. And I think that people like us, I also have, I'm almost 100% sure I have undiagnosed ADHD. And it's hard enough to have the chronic illness and the pain associated with it and the weakness and all the other symptoms. But when it's very hard for you to concentrate and you're jumping around, it's even harder. And I think that what you said about your MBA truly resonated with me, not only personally, because this is something that it's quite rare. A lot of times you don't have this experience. And I think this why we need more programs like this of general leadership, to bring people together that want to make a change and grow together. And this is the main idea of my patient school model that I've developed, to have this framework that people in a cohort learn together about their condition and empower each other. But this is much harder to achieve than I expected, because it doesn't matter how amazing the idea is, you need to productize it and you need
Yeah.
to bring it to millions of people in order to have sustainable funding.
Yeah.
And this is something that is always, for me, remains a question, is like, do I want to take 2-3 years journey towards something that the chances of succeeding is around 3% at best? Or do I want to just be authentic to myself, or write down what I think?
Yeah.
And at the moment, I think that both of us decided to be authentic to ourselves and to create communities around us. Um, and I, I think it's really inspiring for me what you're saying. It's really it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability
It
to say,
does.
like,
It does.
I am a highly trained person with a PhD and an MBA from one of the world's top schools, and I will not go down this path. Maybe some of the listeners don't understand redundancy in this fact. Redundancy means to be laid off or to be fired because there is not enough resources. And this is a beautiful word of something which is very hard. There is grief coming with it, but you decided to channel it into something that is preventive and
Yeah.
promoting and empowering. And I would love to hear more about it. And the idea that I have right now is that I think we should have another part for this podcast and just
Yeah.
talk in depth about how do you do it with your community.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd definitely be up for that. And I guess to speak to, I mean, this could again be a whole another
Yeah.
podcast, but like to speak to redundancy at the moment, because I think it's a big issue that since COVID, there's been a lot of layoffs.
Yeah.
And there's the untold stories of
Yeah.
people like you and I. Because, if you're going to lay anyone off, you're going to lay off the person who doesn't show up every day of the week,
Yeah.
isn't the one coming to the office, right? And
Yeah.
it's almost like we lost all those the good
Yeah.
thinking that we had, right? Because we went back to basics. This is about money. And
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not alone in the fact that with these conditions that I was pretty much masking a lot of the time and figuring out, and I'm sure there's many people who have been laid off as a result of the fact that they have these health conditions and there was no support, no real policies in place, and no language, and people didn't even realize that they had this.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly difficult to deal with. This wasn't a quick, oh, this has happened, great, I have time and I
Yeah.
have
No.
skills.
Yeah.
And it really challenged me, and it's something to do with the resilience of people who have chronic conditions, that I knew I'd get through it, but it had to take its time, because physically, stress is a big factor of inflammation. It causes flare-ups. They didn't know this. And I went through these stages that I've never been through before. I went through anger. I was angry at the fact that, because I actually decided, so my previous job, I didn't disclose. I mean, I'm talking 10 years ago, which isn't that long, but I didn't feel safe to disclose. I had to at some point. I was there for a long time, and there was that lack of support. Nobody kind of knew how to deal with it, and I got incredibly frustrated. I decided to, when I changed, to not disclose initially, because again, I wanted the job, and I thought I didn't feel comfortable. And ironically, this job was building AI tools for individuals who were really far from the labor market line. So unemployed individuals, but those who had lots of challenges. That was the job. But I don't think anybody saw me as that individual. And I don't think I saw myself as that individual, because I'd been masking it and figuring out ways to get by and not disclosing that I had this. And so that was just super ironic that I was laid off by that company, but because it just boils down to reflecting back, and why was I the one? And it's because I did disclose at some point, and I'm not saying that this is definite, but I'm making assumptions here, but I did disclose, and nothing really changed. And I had to do a lot of educating. I had to defend myself quite a lot. And when it came down to it, was I again? And this speaks to the problem that we have, which is it's the unconscious bias. If I was that person, would I choose the person who was showing up Monday to Friday, or the person that was late, seemingly lazy, right? And so it was a lot to process at once, because this it wasn't personal. There's a lot of unconscious bias happening.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that I even spoke about it. It's still, it's me, one person saying this is just not enough. And yeah, it took months. It took months to. I kind of went the opposite. I did what you did, which is, and I think it's a very human thing, solutions.
Yeah.
I need solutions. And I think it speaks to the fact that we need certainty. We need certainty. We need something. We need validation, because we're typically undervalued. We need to keep ourselves busy, because actually, when you strip all of that, you're left with yourself, and you're left with the pain, and you're left with your condition, and you're left alone because you don't have those the right communities. And I just thought, I just don't want anyone to have to go through this. I know people are, and I don't unfortunately know who they are. I can't even reach out to them.
Exactly.
So I'm going to build the thing but the thing that I'm building isn't, because you're right. Like, another thing is, I could build a thing. I have the knowledge and the experience, but it's not going to be. I need to get it right, and also
Yeah,
it's I've only got one chance to do this because of my condition. I cannot afford, like,
exactly.
the rule book. The blueprint out there is work 24/7, try it, do all these things, and something will stick. But that doesn't work for people like you and I. Like, we
No,
cannot afford. We don't have the
no,
energy. We don't have the time. And so what it forces us to do is to sit back, take our time, figure out the problem, um, and be smart about it. Right? Do it a different way. Do it a different way. And I would love to do another podcast about this, because where is that? Where is that book? Where is that? Nobody, even in the MBA, that's not what they're teaching you. What they're teaching you is good.
no.
They're teaching you the foundations, and how you apply those foundations for your situation and for you is great, because you don't get taught this. What you get taught is what's on LinkedIn, and
Right.
the solutions and where it's worked. And here's what you do in 10 steps, right? But they don't
Yeah,
tell you, here was our starting point, here are the foundations. Now figure out kind of what works for you. And that's a whole different thing that takes much long. It does take much longer. And I don't think you don't really want to do that alone, because again, that's not very sustainable. So if you're going to do anything, you're going to build anything, you need people, because your starting point is different. That you can't work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
no.
Okay, let's face it, you can't work full time all the time, especially when you're trying to build something in entrepreneurship. And you need different tactics, and there's not enough community around that, I don't think. So maybe you and I should
Yeah,
start something,
maybe we should.
because I want
Th-
more people who have these conditions thinking, yes, that is something I can do and something I want to try and do.
that's brilliant, because I was talking to different stakeholders recently about, do we need some sort of training for patient advocates? And then, they did some name dropping. Oh, we have this and this organizations that have these online courses which teaches you a bit about
Mm,
drug development and technology, health technology assessment. But I said, like, where is the community? Where is the part when I meet like-minded people? And I'm trying, there are groups for,
mm,
men with rare diseases, women with, and those are lovely and needed. But the entrepreneurial part of people like us
mm-hmm.
wanting to solve things for other people is truly lacking. And maybe we can use this
Yeah.
opportunity to talk about something that can come up together, because this mind hive idea is so strong. Our journey is, to begin with, very lonely with chronic illness, and when you're an entrepreneur with chronic illness, it's even lonelier. And I simply had enough of doing things myself for myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I want to translate my pain into purpose. So,
Right, right. And it's something that is so needed right now. You're right, because if you think
absolutely.
about it, the data's there, the science is
Yeah,
there, articles are coming out, people are in a large chunk of the population are now suffering with these
yeah,
conditions and pain and inflammation and all these things. So why shouldn't we be supported? Why we have the experience,
yeah,
we have the drive, and we have the
correct.
passion, and we're not alone. Yet there's you and I, but I'm sure there are many people who want to help people like ourselves. That
Absolutely.
is now becoming a societal problem. And
Yeah,
so it's at what point do you wait? Do you create your own thing? And no, you create your own thing, because
yeah,
it's a gap, and
yeah,
it's needed right now. Like, you and I can see it, but I think trying to enter the business and the entrepreneurial landscape, there's going to be resistance. There's going to be
of
resistance,
course.
and there's going to be challenge, which is why you need that support. So you're right. That community is so essential when you're trying to do something different, and it doesn't exist. Um, and so it doesn't exist. You create it,
You
and
created.
you create it. So I'd happy to keep discussing this.
Absolutely. I feel it, I'm feeling inspired, and I think that's why I started this podcast, because a lot of people that I talk to are talking to me about metrics and
Mm.
optimization of podcasts, and everybody has a podcast, so why would you start? And if you start, you have to go to the millions, but eventually, like, I'm doing this because of what we said in the beginning. It's about storytelling, it's about being vulnerable and sharing our stories and finding mutual things we can change together, and this is really inspiring to me.
And just to say two things on that we talk about, there needs to be change in leadership. So one thing I've learned in the MBA and my time in business is there's a lack of empathy. There's just a lack of empathy in businesses. You cannot function like I think we talked about it. The healthcare system doesn't exist without patients, right? And there's
Yeah,
this imbalance, the same thing that's happening in businesses. And so as a leader now, we're now starting to talk about empathy as a strength, right? Well, what fuels empathy? It's stories,
yeah,
storytelling. So people
yeah.
like you and I need to be telling these stories because they're kind of opening to listen to them, right? They don't exist. Um, the more stories there are, the more likely they will hear them. And so that's why you do podcasts, and that's why you do this, because we need more of these stories to be told.
Okay.
Um, and so, yeah, I just want to encourage that because it's just so important and so needed right now.
Thank you. And this is why I don't care about titles or success stories. Like, everybody, I got like 30 emails the day I just published on LinkedIn that I'm looking for people of people who say, I want to share my story, which is
Mm,
incredible to me, because a few years back, as far as I remember, people were really shy about the idea of talking publicly about a chronic illness. But it's been boiling up, and as you said, like, when you're facing lack of empathy from healthcare, and
mhm.
lack of empathy from work or study places, and in many cases, I'm afraid, lack of empathy from your even close surroundings, like
Yeah.
supposedly support system. So you're left alone with yourself, and the only ways to put it out there is really to share stories. Um, Everything we said about business is very relevant to what's happening in medical training. I've done my thesis on empathy in medical training, and the deterioration of it. How fast does a young doctor lose their empathy?
Oh,
And as you
that's
said, like,
interesting. I'd be interested in reading that.
oh, thank you. I would love to share it. And funnily enough, again, people are telling me, yeah, so the solution is to do some sort of tech to do it. But actually, it's talking about it. It's me being a guest lecturer in some universities, and I'm talking to medical students about it. I think that fuel much more change than to try to compete with yet another digital health product.
Hmm.
Um, and having a podcast and having writing books. Um, I think we should not feel less because we are not competing with this imposter
Right.
syndrome society that, oh, we have to be CEOs or founders, or we have to do this. Like, if we're not employed, we have to be not only self-employed, we need to make it appear like we're extremely successful. But I don't
Hmm.
think it's the case at all. It's about stability. It's about making enough money to survive and live a happy life while doing something that really fuels us and not putting us back into relapses. um so this has been extremely inspiring. And to end this wonderful chat that we have, I wanted to ask you if you have any question for me, because usually I ask my guests to ask me a question.
Yeah, I do. And just before I do that, I did want to say, because we were just finishing off the talk about innovation and sort of like
Yeah,
what's next. So I just wanted to say that, we at InflamMed um are actually gearing up for an excited new project that I can't wait to unveil. Um and because it is a process. And I think, stopping to reflect and actually celebrating what's been achieved is again something that we don't do enough of.
yeah,
Um, and this initiative will specifically focus on chronic inflammation and non-apparent conditions in the workplace.
wonderful.
Um, so we're just deeply committed to shedding light on these issues, and creating solutions, whatever they may be. That this is
Exactly.
just an intent and a focus that we want to give, because I think, I said at the beginning that we spend most of our lives in a workplace, and it significantly affects health. And I think right now is a good time to do something, because people are people are listening.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm eager to share the details soon. But yeah, I just wanted to announce that. And yeah, so my question to you, I think I want to ask, what has your chronic illness taught you?
Wow, that's a big one.
It is a big one.
To be honest, it taught me a few things, but I think that the major would be um, to value health and time. And sometimes my partner is watching these stupid reels of people, I don't know, making stupid things in the gym and just like jumping around and falling, and then I said, wow, they have no idea. Like, they have no idea um, what they're wasting. Like, if you're doing like pulling a prank and then you injure yourself
Mm,
for the sake of views, you don't know. Like, for me, watching somebody just climb a few steps, it's like watching somebody climb the Everest.
mm,
It's really this appreciation of what it means to be healthy.
mm,
It might sound like a cliche, but you only appreciate it when you lose it. And
yeah.
some people lose it to an extent, but I was, completely bedridden and completely disabled. Yeah, it's about bringing yourself to every place that you're coming to. It's
Mm,
about respecting your own time and appreciating the quality of life that you have. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I think what you're
thank you.
speaking to is self-respect.
Self-respect. Yeah, it's a
And
beautiful way to put it.
yeah, yeah, it's a good message for people to start to hear, because I don't think it's something that we practice enough.
I
And it is
agree.
a process. And people with chronic illness, or chronic conditions, it can be a long journey. So yeah, that's a beautiful message.
Thank you so much. And I'm on a journey in a separate podcast and a separate like I started a project that is called The Way Out, and I'm documenting 1 year of my life trying to get better using self-management, self-care, and other methodologies. I would be delighted to learn more about inflammation because I want to be better, and I'm sharing it. And I think that the reason I'm doing everything I'm doing is eventually to prevent other people from going through the nightmare that I've been through.
Yeah,
And I think you're sharing the same values. And this conversation is the exact reason why I started Chronically as a project and why I started this podcast. And I'm fueled with inspiration and a lot of thoughts running around, and this is wonderful. I will link InflamMed website here and your LinkedIn so people can follow you and
yeah. If you'd
connect
like
with
to
you.
learn more about what we're doing, there's the website, inflamed.co.uk. But also, please join the community at inflamed.substack.com.
Great.
It's where we share all the content. And just to say as well that we're always looking for passionate voices like yourself. So I'm open to collaboration and contribution. So whether you're interested in writing for us or becoming a guest on the podcast, please, we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is called Invisible Insights. And yeah, that's everything for me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Natasha Punia. It's been really one of the most deep and insightful conversation I had in a long time. And thank you for being who you are and doing what you do and for fueling change in this very important realm that we are trying to fix or to make better.
Amazing.
And I think that I will see you soon for another part talking in depth about inflammation.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And thank you, Roy, for having me. And you're also a massive, massive inspiration to me. So I'm so happy
Thank you
we
so much.
connected. And
Same
yeah,
here.
I can't
Thank you.
wait to speak to you again.
Likewise. Thank you so much. And for our dear listeners and viewers, thank you so much for taking the time, and we'll see you next week.